Here are my top 10 or so favorite titles for making ancient Greece come alive. Welcome to the Simply Charlotte Mason podcast. I'm Sonya Schaefer. Too often, ancient Greece is just tossed into a quick overview of ancient times. But there are so many interesting and valuable stories from that time period, and so many great books, that can help us get a clearer picture of what life was like during Old Testament times. That's why I like to take a full year to combine a study of Joshua through Malachi with ancient Greece. And if you would like to linger in that time period with some wonderful books, take a look at our lesson plan guide. It's called Joshua through Malachi and Ancient Greece, and it will give you the book list that I'm about to share today, along with a weekly schedule and daily reading plans. The main spine book that I like to use for this time period is The Story of the Greeks by H.A. Gerber, but I always recommend the Nothing New Press edition. Christine Miller's careful editing does a fabulous job of distinguishing between ancient history, legend, and myth. And it approaches the ancient time period from a biblical worldview. The short chapters make this book a great family read-aloud that forms the spine for your study. Then, branching off of that spine, you can add grade-level books that supplement and expand on the time period. Two historical fiction books that I love for grades 1 through 6 are both written by Julia Darrow Cowles, Our Little Athenian Cousin of Long Ago and Our Little Spartan Cousin of Long Ago. These stories bring those ancient cultures alive and do a great job of portraying the differences between living in Athens and living in Sparta in ancient Greece. Another great author that I like to recommend for grades 4 through 6 is Jean Bendick. Her books are not historical fiction, but interesting and living biographies. The two that I like to use for this time period are Archimedes and the Door of Science and Herodotus and the Road to History. Her biographies help you get to know the historical figure as a person, not just as a name to associate with a fact. You remember the facts, but they are presented in a much more living way. For grades 7 through 9, we have a descriptive book and a historical fiction to mention. First, The Parthenon by Elizabeth Mann. Now, if you've watched some of my other favorite books episodes, you may recall other titles by this author that I've recommended for the whole family. But for some reason, this particular one seems heavier, longer, and more fitted for older students. It's a great introduction to a beautiful building and the culture of Athens at its height, including its democracy, its religion, and its wars. Then the historical fiction for grades 7 through 9 is by Alfred Church, a young Macedonian in the army of Alexander the Great. This title does a fabulous job of making that time period come alive. It depicts life and battle tactics in the time of ancient Greece, as well as how the various countries and their citizens interacted with each other. You can find that book free online. One note, Chapter 23 contains a scene in which the two chief characters of the story visit a Babylonian magician. That fortune-telling scene is brief, and it's accompanied by the characters' doubts as to its authenticity. I think that chapter is a valuable look at what was a stronghold in that culture, and it is approached with healthy skepticism and balance. Just thought you might like to know about it ahead of time. For high school students, grades 10 through 12, let me recommend two classics and an old historical fiction. First, one of Plutarch's Greek lives, the biography of Alexander. Plutarch's biographies were a favorite with Charlotte Mason, and your student will gain a deeper understanding of Alexander the Great's character by reading what Plutarch wrote about his life. Then another classic, The Trial and Death of Socrates by Plato. In these 4 dialogues, Plato sets forth conversations about Socrates' philosophies and ideas. They're not easy reading by any means, but your student will be challenged to think about the concepts of piety and religion, about Socrates' teachings, about his respect for the law in refusing to flee from his death sentence, and about his views on death and the immortality of the soul. A Victor of Salamis by William Stearns Davis is an older historical fiction that you can find free online. It's written in the older style, which is one reason I recommend it for grades 10 through 12. Due to a case of mistaken identity, the main character is forced to flee from Athens and ends up in the Persian court. Over time, he becomes a favorite of King Artaxerxes and grows to feel quite comfortable in his new home. But when the Persians go to battle against the Greeks, he must choose which side he is on. Now, some of you are probably wondering, what about the Iliad and the Odyssey? Those epic Greek poems by Homer that are considered classics for this time period. Well, I like to recommend the original version of the Odyssey, translated into English, of course, for high school students, grades 10 through 12. They could also read the Iliad as a bonus title, but that one seems a bit more bloody and battlefield-focused. It's up to you if you want to do both. You know your student best. There are other alternatives that I like to recommend for the younger grades. Rosemary Sutcliffe has written 2 retellings that are quite good. Black Ships Before Troy and The Wanderings of Odysseus would be good options for grades 7 through 9. I recommend both of them, and I include them in the reading schedules in that Joshua through Malachi and Ancient Greece plans. Then, if you want to introduce The Adventures of Odysseus and The Tale of Troy to even younger students as a bonus, you might take a look at The Children's Homer by Padraic Colum. It would be appropriate for students as young as 9 or 10. You can find several other bonus titles listed on our website. I'll leave a link in the show notes. We are posting bonus titles there, and we'll be adding to the lists as we discover and review other books that we think will help you give your children an enjoyable and living study of history. I'll leave a link to the Joshua through Malachi and Ancient Greece lesson plans, too, just in case you would like those open-and-go plans for the books that I mentioned today. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.